elevator maintenance, folks. What is the weirdest thing you have found at the bottom of the elevator chamber? Story 1. Keys, trash, bugs. If the building is exceptionally shitty, mostly dirt and dust. Found a paint roller that the last guy left there once. It was stuck to the floor. Not a whole lot of weird stuff can make it between the sill and the landing. Story 2. This question should be my jam, but unfortunately I've never found anything interesting. 2 coin once, a dime bag of some unknown drug, plenty of syringes, or sets of keys. It's mostly just people's junk mail and empty chip bags down there. Story 3. I once accidentally lost my driver's license down the little gap in the elevator doors. Just dropped it and was super unlucky as it slipped through. It turned up in my mail 10 years later, obviously long expired, but still crazy. Some maintenance guy found it and bothered retuning it. Story 4. Worked at a hotel. Guests dropped their phone down the shaft. After a few failed retrieval efforts, we called the elevator guys. They went down, got the phone, and also found a carton of eggs, rotten, but not cracked. I don't even understand how that could happen accidentally. Story 5. My dad has a great story about this. He supervised the mechanics, and one of them called him from a mental hospital and said, "You've got to see this." The maintenance guy was called because the elevator wasn't quite sitting level on the ground floor. It was about half an inch too high and both patients and staff had been tripping on it. But all other floors were no problem. My dad arrived to find the maintenance guy cackling, looking into the bottom of the shaft. There were probably tens of thousands of magazines down there. They had to get a bunch of shovels, a small crew, and a rolling dumpster to clear it out. When it was all done, my dad decided to stay behind and pretend to read a newspaper while he sat in the lobby. After about half an hour, he sees an elderly patient holding a magazine, shuffling slowly toward the elevator. He stops in front of the doors, glances left, glances right, and quickly stoops down, slides the magazine into the gap, and shuffles away as fast as he can with a huge grin on his face. My dad could not help but laugh hysterically. This guy had probably been sliding magazines in there multiple times per day, every day for decades. I should ask him whether he reported it or let the guy have his fun. Wouldn't surprise me if my dad went with the latter. Story 6. Work security in a large department store. We routinely had to pop it open to retrieve dropped keys, wallets, and phones. Recovered a 2,500 gold necklace covered in. A would-be shoplifter darted out of our jewelry department and suitcased the necklace while in the elevator. When he realized we were waiting for him at the exit level, he went back up a floor, removed it, and dropped it down the shaft. We arrested him anyway, much to his surprise. Story 7. Not a technician, but do work at a large hotel. A few years ago one of our elevators stopped working. Turned out when they opened it up they found a 3-foot pile of guest folios that were never delivered to the rooms. Later when we looked on the camera we found it was a security guard that got tired of delivering them to the rooms and instead dropped them down the elevator shaft. He did this for months until he was caught. Story 8. My dad was an elevator mechanic for about 15 years. He had a very dark sense of humor and would come home with some of the craziest stories. For example, anytime he was in an elevator, he would shake it a little or tap on the displays or buttons and go, "Yep, total piece of, inferior piece of." And I think he mostly did it to freak people out. One of my favorites, he got a call that someone was hearing weird noises from the elevator. He got inside, rode the elevator up, and sure enough, he could hear it too. For half a second he thought it was a baby crying and realized it was a cat. When he got to a certain floor, he could hear this sad meowing. It obviously wasn't in the elevator car, so he got into the shaft and found this little orange kitty. It had somehow, and I don't think he figured out or told us how, got into the elevator shaft and was sitting in a spot between the floors where it wouldn't get crushed by the elevator, but it couldn't get out. My dad saved it and gave it to the building manager to see if it belonged to anyone in the building. It was the one time he ever told us a story that involved him saving an animal instead of finding dead ones. Story 9. Been in the game 12 years now. Found a full Christmas tree last month. Other finds 5K in 20 notes. Big bag of drugs. Roughly 5 kilograms. Brand new shoes by the box load. Severed finger. Edit. Holy, this is blown up. My most commented and upvoted on Reddit. So backstory. Christmas tree was found this year on a council estate in August. Photos was taken for the office as it was rather amusing. I visit this lift every month. The money and drugs was found in the same lift shift around 3 months apart 7 years ago. The money was spilt between me and my engineer as I was an apprentice at the time. The drugs we handed into security. The shoes was found on a passenger staff lift out the back of JD Sports. Suspect a staff member was sticking them down there and loading into a car at the end of his shift. Police was involved in this one. The finger was found in a very expensive apartment building. We talking 50 floors and million apartments. Again, police and EMG services involved in this one. Story 10. One time, we were doing a rip out at an old factory. They were gutting them and turning them into luxury apartments. The elevator we were taking out was a shitty old freight that hadn't run in years. When we finally ran it up, we went down to inspect the pit. It smelled like a dead body had chilled there for half a century. The bottom floor wasn't lit, so I shined my flashlight under the elevator and the whole floor started moving. Roaches. Nasty. Haven't really found anything fun though. I've cleaned out more pits than I could count too. I gave my mom a cheap ring I found a pair of underwear at a hotel. Found a full packet at a courthouse of some lattice case transcribed. Oh, I was on a mod once and one of the hoistway doors had an advertisement sticker for a tennis restringing service, which was weird because it was somewhere only an elevator guy should be able to reach. I called the number, but it was out of service. I found some cool graffiti from the 40s. That's about it. I worked on escalators for a year and a half. There was a lot more in those pits. I was taking home bent-up quarters every day. There was lots of shoe bits and I was always nervous of coming across used needles in certain units. Story 11 Out team dropped a steel dilator down the dumbwaiter shaft by mistake. When the technician came down and grabbed it off the floor, he'll never forget the look on his face when I told him we need that up here, it's got to go in someone soon. It was priceless. I am a technician for a hospital. Dealing with rectal surgical tools is very normal. Story 12 Not an elevator repair person, but you would be shocked by the number of nurses that dropped their keys down the shaft. 20 stories up and 2 buildings away from the parking garage, and they already had their keys in their hand. I had to call maintenance all the time for retrieval. Story 13 There are at least 6 people who saw purple and everyone left it there. Either all have seen the same purple or purple dildos are more common sight at the bottom of the elevator shaft. Absolutely sure everyone is telling the truth. Story 14 TLDR Turds obligatory wasn't an elevator tech but hotel maintenance. Guest reports waterfall sounds in elevator shaft en route to the lobby. Investigation ensues. Some pump at bottom of shaft is running constantly. Water is still coming out of the drain it's connected to after I unplug it. Find out from notes of third shift maintenance that multiple first floor rooms had repeated clogged toilets all night long. Plumber called. 6-inch sewer drain for the entire building is clogged. Worst clog I've seen in 15 years. Washcloths and TP. Over 7 inches of clog in the pipe. Apparently it was clogged so bad that it was backing up into the laundry room, the drain for the elevator shaft, and the rooms closest to the main pipe out of the building first floor suites. Solid turds were left at the bottom of that shaft. I quit about a week later for unrelated circumstances. Story 15 At a place where my wife used to work a body, there was a crash from the elevator area. The boss went to see what it was, came back white as a sheet, and said do not go out there. 2 maintenance guys have been working on the elevator. One was in the bottom of the shaft, and the other one made one small error. But I'm guessing the single most unusual item ever found at the bottom of an elevator shaft was a Wright R2600 aircraft engine, on July 28, 1945 in the Empire State Building. Story 16 A purple, it was kinda weird, so I just left it, so the next guy will also have the joy of finding it. Edit, I did not expect this to blow up like this. Story 17 I used to work at an old 22-story building that had the first automated elevator system in our state. The idea was, in order to control the flow of people in the lobby, you'd push the button for your floor and the elevator would tell you which one to get on. The elevators would make sure the crowd spread out over the big lobby. Anyway, it was the first time I'd ever seen the auto-open eyes used too. I worked on the executive floor, where long-winded executives would often stop me as I was leaving. I got used to passing my hand through the doors to break the eye and hold the doors open. You guessed it, my left hand didn't trip the eye. The doors closed on my hand, which was prevented from closing completely because of my heavy engagement and wedding rings. Crushed the whole mess and lost a 2-carat diamond 22 stories below. My hand was only bruised. Thank goodness for a safety shutoff. I like to think that someday, someone will find a tiny treasure. Story 18 Purple left it there. Found a $20 bill in an escalator in a casino once. Still have it. Most elevator pits are just filled with dirt, dust and random bits of trash. Every once in a while somebody drops their keys. Pretty routine. One of my baseball coaches when I was a kid lost his glass eyeball in the elevator shaft. Maintenance guy gave a solid WTF. Story 19 Surprisingly nothing too extreme. Not an elevator tech, but I am an electrician, so we will find ourselves in a pit from time to time. Some ID badges, credit cards, coins. Once I found a red pen. It was out of ink though. Story 20 Not elevator maintenance, but one time I dropped a set of wheels for a cart in the crack. I'm sure some maintenance man is going to be concerned to find loose wheels in the elevator of a nursing home, like some elder person is walking around with a wheel-less walker. Story 21 Retired 40 years in the trade. The best I ever found was a 20,000 bill. But know a man that found a 7,000 diamond ring, kept it for 6 months, no one ever asked about it, and he gave it to his wife. Story 22 Work for a major transit hub. We have our own trade departments. I'm in elevating. Weirdest things I have found are as follows. Chucky doll head, 13 rubber duckies in one pit, drug needles almost daily, silicone gimp mask. Every day is an adventure. Story 23 Empty drug bags, used condoms, needles, money, discarded lotto tickets. Usually the norm. If you are lucky, maybe an infestation of roaches, sometimes LOL. Story 24 This plasticky purple thing. Pretty sure it was a or something. I swear to God it looked like a tentacle. Didn't want to have anything to do with it though. I just kinda nudged it in a corner with my foot. Story 25 In 1988, the same bones were rediscovered when a new elevator shaft near the south parking lot on Elm Street was excavated. At that time, 11 skulls and 88 pounds of bones were found on one day, followed by 119 more pounds of bones. The Inquirer reported that they were being stored at the morgue. Cincinnati Music Hall, built on a children's home, built on a potter's field, built on a burial site, built on bulldozed indigenous mounds. Story 26 Not an elevator technician, but I can tell you some dude at some point is going to find a Kindle at the bottom of a shaft in a Toronto hotel elevator. Rules to remember. Rule 1, always check that you zipped your carry-on and didn't leave a gap in the bottom. Rule 2, Kindles fit through small carry-on bag zipper gaps and elevator shaft gaps. Story 27 It depends on the building neighborhood. I've seen everything from dirty diapers, to to use needles, keys, wallets, phones, picture frames, sandwiches, and I guess the icing on the cake was a Tamagotchi. No, it didn't work, so we typically just trashed everything unless it was valuable. I always turned jewelry into the management's office, but I worked with guys who sold valuables for unsavory purposes. TLDR, the crack between the car and the door sill is a black hole for objects. Story 28, I had to clean some bad isolation at the top of the elevator chamber. So the maintenance guy bring the elevator with the top of the second floor and we go on top to drive to the top. On the elevator cabine were a few pairs of women underwear and used condoms. So someone was having on the top of the elevator. How they got there was a mystery because it was a very modern one and you need a special key to open the control box to access the top of the elevator. Story 29, not in elevator repair. A few months ago we had a floridly psychotic patient think staring into space, can't form a coherent sentence, etc. brought into hospital. There was a fire alarm at an apartment building and when fire went in, they somehow found this guy living in an elevator shaft. He had evidently been there for some period of time. Most of his delusions that he was talking about for me that I could understand were about time travel and Jesus, so we were joking a bit that he wasn't actually psychotic and was just time-traveling Jesus. Story 30, I worked as a phlebotomist in a hospital and had just drawn an elderly male patient. As I pushed my little cart into the elevator to go back down to the lab, his blood vials rolled off and both went right down the gap into the shaft. I felt so bad and went immediately back to tell him I had to redraw him. He was thrilled, said he was excited his blood would be down the shaft for eternity. Such a funny guy. Story 31, hay race and obligatory, not one of the elevator maintenance folk story. My dad had a razor phone back when they were still cool. Just to annoy him, my mom changed the ringtone to the sound of a meowing cat. My dad absolutely hated it, but didn't change it. Anyway, one day at work, he's getting out of the elevator and accidentally drops his phone into the crack between the elevator car and the doors. He calls maintenance and asks them if they can get his phone back, but they say sorry, we can't do that. So he's standing outside the elevator thinking of what to do and he gets an idea. Running into a nearby office, he asks a coworker if he can use their desk phone for a second, and proceeds to call his own phone. He does this a few times. A couple minutes later, someone else hysterically phones security, saying that there's a cat stuck in the elevator shaft. A few other people in the elevator at the time corroborate the story, so the elevator maintenance folk run the elevator up the shaft and shine some light down there. Meanwhile, my dad and some other people are standing by the open doors to the shaft, looking downwards. My dad says, "Hey, I don't see any cat. But I think I see my phone down there. Can you guys grab it for me?" And they do. Story 32, not exactly answer to the question but still related. When we came to call about broken doors, we was not expecting that someone for some unknown reason stole one half of elevator's door. Story 33, holy, I asked a guy this at work last night. Wasn't as surprising as I expected. Just a ball, a very large ball, that had no business being able to get down there. Then I asked if he ever left anything strange down there for the next guy. He went quiet and slowly turned to me, pulling a Barbie out of his pocket. My dad has been an elevator repairman for almost 30 years now. His best find to date was a 12,000 yellow diamond engagement ring. Tried for a while to find the owner, but eventually he got to keep it. Story 34, I am not an elevator maintenance person, but I have been in dozens of elevator shafts for work. I'm a bomb tech, and when I was in the army I did a lot of POTUS missions in conjunction with the Secret Service. They don't have a bomb squad, so they steal us. It's a great gig, you get to travel all over and stay in some insanely nice hotels. Anyway, the elevator shafts must be cleared to ensure that there aren't any explosive devices. Basically, any place that POTUS or the VIP will go needs to be checked out. I've done a fair amount of elevator surfing, which is riding on top of the car. The weirdest and funniest thing I've seen was a 12-inch around that height Superman figurine that had its feet glued to the top of the elevator. The head was slightly tilted back and the arms were pointed upwards, so it appeared like Superman was flying up, and away, whenever the elevator was in use. I have a picture of it saved on an external hard drive somewhere. That was hilarious. Story 35, elevator repairman here. I haven't found anything crazy, just the normal stuff: cockroaches, underwear, and a couple of bucks, but since you're reading this, I'll let you in on a little no feature. Elevators have a tipping feature. If you slip money down between the sill into the pit, the elevator will get you to your floor faster. If you put in enough money, it will skip all other calls and bring you right to your floor. You're welcome. Story 36, I found ID cards, keys, small dead animals, lizards and rats mostly, lots of cobwebs, hypodermic needles, one AirPod, and things like that. The weirdest thing I've ever found as a repair guy is a clean pit. The service guys seem to not clean anything. Story 37, a handgun hidden behind the door tracks on the elevator. Many times keys, tools, money, drugs, tampons. Once I found a dead cat skeleton. Still wonder how he got in. Story 38, the company where I worked had an old heavy-duty freight elevator that was semi-abandoned. It was more like an automotive lift with giant pistons embedded in the ground, but installed in an elevator shaft. When they needed to move something huge, they would fill the hydraulics with oil. It took hundreds of gallons to top off the system, including the giant pistons, and then they would use it for a day. A few months later they would try to use it again and find the oil gone. Once they planned to use it the following day, so maintenance pumped in the oil to get ready. The next day, no oil. They refilled it the morning of the move and got one lift out of it before it stopped. The company knew it was spilling hydraulic oil into the ground under the plant and just did not give a. They finally abandoned it for good when the maintenance guys threatened to report the illegal oil dumping. Story 39 Me gets ticket elevator no longer operates. Me goes down to bottom of elevator shaft. Also me finds industrial-sized pallet of dildos at the bottom of the elevator shaft. Story 40 It sounds like it's not as uncommon as I thought for people to find money, keys and other esoterica, and I'm glad I'm not alone in my findings, but I guarantee no one's found what I came across. In the courthouse of my hometown, which has an elevator for mobility-impaired visitors, I was asked to take a look at the mechanism after a particularly violent tantrum following a not-desired verdict that rendered the elevator unsafe. As I was rooting around the detritus while clearing it away, I came across a thin folder containing what appeared to be some key witness statements. I didn't take a closer look for legal reasons, and I decided to track down the legal personnel who they belonged to. Turned out they were still practicing law in my hometown, so I made appointment to hand them over. When I did, the lawyer expressed surprise over what I had found because they related to a crucial case that was held in 1998 when the Undertaker threw mankind off HLL in a cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table. Story 41 In a twist, I appear to be the first non-elevator worker. I have lost 2 pair of glasses down the elevator shaft, 2 different elevators across the country. The first time it was like slow motion. They fell, I accidentally kicked them while trying to pick them up, and as they skittered away from me, the elevator door opened and they slipped down the crack between the doors. Everyone in the elevator froze while it happened and we were all shocked at the perfect timing. The second time was less dramatic, but similarly unlucky timing as I blurrily watched another pair slip down between the doors. Fortunately, I always have backup glasses, so it wasn't a huge loss. Story 42 In college, I pulled out my lanyard on which my Motorola RAZR was sitting. My phone flew up in the air and dropped in the gap between the elevator and the floor. It dropped 4 floors. Maintenance was able to climb down there. My phone barely had a scratch. Story 43 Just a shout out to elevator maintenance folks. You really lift us up and never let us down too hard. But seriously, I was on the 10th floor in a hotel, trying to get my room key out of my pocket, and my AirPods went bouncing and fell right down the crack. Gone. Went down to the front desk and in 15 minutes my dude had retrieved them for me, delivered them to my room, and they still worked. A true OG. Story 44 Not an elevator tech buoy. We were running a warrant at a horrible multi-story building that had been essentially abandoned by the owners. We knew the top floor had been riddled with access ways between many of the old apartments by kicking through the drywall. Essentially most of the top floor was a single super apartment. We knew the elevator was out, so we hit the stairs as soon as we pulled up. The building was abandoned to the point of smelling bad, but we knew there were squatters that lived here. It wasn't a huge haul up, but running stairs with all your gear isn't exactly a vacation. We got to the top floor and started working on containment. Within a minute or two we heard calls of contact behind us, followed by the yells for someone to get on the ground. The floor was quickly secured with no injuries, which is a good day. Rounding back to the entry hallway, we learned that our suspect had kicked down the drywall opposite the elevator and thrown some bundles down the elevator shaft before he was taken into custody. A quick conversation, asking the folks on the ground floor to pop the elevator doors and see what was there. Horrible idea. Within seconds a screamed stop and was heard up the stairwell. The ground floor of the elevator was completely filled with, as part of the ceiling from the elevator had caved in, and the cast-off of humanity was seeping in. We rapidly learned that it was even worse for the second floor as it was filled almost to the top. The abandoned building had a trash chute, in the form of the broken elevator shaft, all kinds of dirty diapers, a dead cat, syringes, garbage bags, garbage out of bags, little fluffs of toilet paper with nasty streaks on them, broken glass, and a curious amount of unbroken bottles that all seemed to be filled with golden yellow liquid. It was a horrible, damp mess. I had to rope down from the top not too many floors to take possession of the bundles that were thrown down. Thankfully all were on top. I stupidly thought this wouldn't be that big of a deal, and then I started my descent. If I screwed up my rope down I was going to bounce off of tetanus incarnate, laced with used hypodermic needles and human. I probably should have found a better way, but this idiot was already descending. It turns out that they really were all the way on top. Steady hands locked the line, and I was able to stretch and reach the bundles. The gang then hooked the line and helped angle me to a safe exit. TLDR abandoned building had evidence thrown into the elevator shaft, after the occupants had been using the elevator shaft to dump every drop of waste down it, accumulating over 20 feet. Story 45 Not a elevator maintenance folk, but I remember when I was maybe 10 I had a Nokia 3310 I believe, one of the brick ones anyway. I dropped it down the bottom of the elevator shaft in the small gap in the doors from the 67th floor. It was down there for months until I saw the elevator maintenance man and asked if he could have a look. Not only was it still down there, unbroken, it also still had battery. Those were the days. Story 46 years ago, I was on maybe week 2 or 3 of my first big boy job after college. I worked accounts payable for a large healthcare company and we were positioned on the 18th floor of our building which happened to be the executive level, only BC there was no other place to put our small AP department. Being the peon, I was in charge of making the trek down to the post office every day and getting the business mail. On one particular day, I forgot my work lanyard which held my door pass, and all my work keys at home so I borrowed one of our vice president's keys to go get the mail with. The time came and I walked to the elevator and right as it opened, I somehow fumbled the keys and they fell perfectly down into the seam on the floor. I could hear them clanking all the way down to the ground level. Took a week to get the elevator maintenance people out there as this wasn't an emergency. That is 1 week that I thought I was surely being fired. The VP hated me from then on, but we just didn't talk. I never got let go for it. Being in AP, I received and coded the bill from the elevator people. It was around $1,000 for someone to open the ground floor door and get the keys. I have no idea why they never took that out of my paycheck. Story 47. Ooh, I've got one that's relevant. My great uncle was a truck driver years back. It wasn't uncommon in those days that people would try to steal things from his truck. One day some mafia guys walked up to the cab, held him at gunpoint, and told him to get down. They brought him up on the roof and gave him a bag. They said someone is watching him, someone will come to pick up the bag. When they do you can go home. If you look in the bag the scout will shoot. He had up there for 2 hours but nobody came. He opened the bag and there was a sandwich and a soda inside. So he ate the sandwich and walked home. They stole the truck. It was recovered abandoned. A few months later the same thing happened. This time they brought him into an abandoned building. When they got there he said he didn't care about the truck but trying to make light of things asked if they had another sandwich. Then they threw him down an elevator shaft in the abandoned building. He broke both legs. Fortunately not long afterwards a cop was passing by and heard him screaming. He quit driving trucks after that. Story 48. Okay, I know this might be up, but when I lived in an apartment building with an elevator, I would often leave things in the elevator shaft just to mess with the maintenance guy. It started because I knew he was superstitious and paranoid and he had been a total to my female roommate and asked her for an alternative payment in exchange for him fixing our fireplace. So, yeah, I used to leave things just to mess with him around the apartment complex. In the elevator shaft, I left a pentagram circled by candles, and in the middle of it I put a porcelain doll and 2 knives I had used to clean chickens and deer, still with blood on them. Beneath the stairs on the first floor, there was an empty space he would store tools behind a metal door. In the far back corner, behind tools he rarely moved, I put a small mattress and some old Polaroids I bought at an estate sale, scratched out the eyes and faces on some of them, so he thought someone was living under the stairs. On the roof of the building, by the AC units, I left a copy of the Satanic Bible that I got from some girl I had met on Tinder and slept with. She tried to convert me to Satanism, and I was perfectly happy being a non-believer in all religions. So the story the maintenance guy told our landlord was that there was a satanic witch squatting under the stairs and performing rituals and practicing witchcraft in the elevator shaft. I moved out with my girlfriend soon after that. But my old roommate said she heard from the landlord that the maintenance guy moved out of the building, and the landlord figured out it was me shortly after I moved out. The landlord thought it was hilarious. Story 49. So I'm a fire alarm technician, and in buildings with a fire system, we have to test the detectors in the elevator shaft on an annual basis. The elevator tech gets called in, and while he does his inspection, we get access to the detectors. The weirdest thing we've ever found. One time we went into an elevator pit and there were hundreds of little balled up pieces of tin foil all over the floor of the pit. We unrolled one and inside was a roach. Not the bug, the discarded stub of a joint. Apparently some kid in the building would walk down the stairwell, go into the back alley and smoke a J, then ball up the roach in a piece of tin foil, and since there was no place to dispose of it, and probably didn't want to get caught throwing it away in his apartment, he just chucked them down the elevator shaft as he went back up. Concierge knew which kid it was because he saw him on the security cameras, so he just told the kid, hey, we don't want you throwing the tin foil down the elevator shaft, so if you have anything to throw away, you can use the bin behind my desk, and I won't say a word. Story 50. Elevator guys once found an envelope with my name on it and gave it to security. Next time I was in the building working they gave it to me, and it was basically a letter from a guard that was fired like 6 or 7 years prior telling me to off. Made for a good laugh the rest of the day. Story 51. It's called an elevator pit. Just so you know, next time, I found 10 roll of quarters, used needles, a bag of weed, dead mouse rat, credit cards, keys, an unusual amount of mail, half of a $100 bill still waiting on the other half. Story 52. I used to work at a hotel. We weren't really allowed to with any of the elevator rooms or anything like that, but we would have to use them constantly. Being an old hotel, they were bound to break on us eventually. Sure enough, on an overnight shift the elevator malfunctioned and the elevator fell down to the bottom chasm area. I was scared shitless. Luckily I was at the lobby level so it only fell past the parking lot and a bit further down. Once I realized I was stuck down there I began to panic and tried to get the out of there any way possible. I was able to pry the door open and it was just all covered in dust. There was so much dust I couldn't see anything for like a minute. Once the dust settled, there it was right in the corner, a purple. Story 53. Cargo weapons elevator tech for the USN here. During maintenance of the aft elevator shaft once I found a bunch of used condoms and a valve handle. The strange thing was that the valve handle was for a valve in the anchor windlass. That's at the front end of the ship. When we went to put the valve handle back we found more used condoms. We weren't surprised at that point. Edit L. I was on a co-ed ship. Story 54. Hey one I can answer. I once found a shopping trolley. I got called out because the elevator would stop above the first floor. Turns out it could not go all the way down because of the trolley. Also urine, a lot of urine, and condoms, bills, mail, keys, a lot of hair, many spiders, dead animals, and so much more. Story 55. After reading only 4 comments, 3 of them mention finding 2 of them were purple. How the does that happen? Edit 5 dildos 7 dildos 15 dildos Friking. I'm not continuing with accounting. Friking Reddit never fails to amaze me and confuse me. Story 56 Elevator technician here. My old mechanic worked in housing. The project's in NYC. He got on top of the elevator and found an M9 and a bag of coke, a full brick, walks out and comes back to it gone and a guy standing there asking what he saw. He said he saw nothing, then the guy walked away. Story 57 A dead body. In 2005 in our small town a person went missing for 5 days and we found him dead in the elevator shaft. He was visiting some relatives in an apartment building at the 8th floor. Unfortunately the door of the elevator had a malfunction and still opened even if the elevator was on the 9th floor. He stepped inside and fell. The neighbors complained about the smell and that's how we found him. Story 58 I write software for elevators. So obviously I'm not a technician but I have a few factoids for this AskReddit question. Elevators that transport cadavers, hospitals, med schools, etc. require custom software so general public doesn't get stuck in the elevator with a cadaver. Many Broadway stages are giant elevators for set design reasons. The software is slightly custom but mostly standard. Elevators get struck by lightning way more than you'd think. We are currently writing custom. Operation for active shooter operation and COVID social distancing operation where America-based a lot of people who start working in software become elevator technicians and make bank. Insanely dangerous job though. Story 59 Sometime in the 1980s, I accidentally dropped my McDonald's Happy Meal Egg McMuffin Transformer toy between the crack between the elevator car and the elevator shaft. So if any of you found one of those, it's probably mine. Please send it back, I still feel its loss. Story 60 I work on elevators. I never found a purple. I feel like I'm not worthy of enough. 90 of time it's trash and dirt, find some keys, lots of mail, probably worst was dead rat mice. Story 61 Contractor here, built an elevator shaft alongside elevator guys. Main guy was telling us about a hotel in Toronto that had a car with 2 exits but nobody knew what the back door was for. Sure enough, on one specific floor was an entire abandoned wing of the hotel that nobody knew about. They kept it to themselves for a while and took breaks there when maintaining said location.